This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Between two-factor authentication, strong passwords, and a VPN, you try to be in control of how your info is protected. But many other places also have it, and they might not be as careful. That's why LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast for 40% off. Terms apply.
When you're separating from the military, no one tells you how hard it can be to get your civilian life up to speed. But with VA benefits, it doesn't have to be. From the VA home loan requiring no down payment, to the GI Bill covering tuition, books, and cost of living, to VA healthcare offering top-ranked, low-cost care designed specifically for veterans. All the support you need is at VA. I'm here telling every veteran because I wish someone had told me. Get what you earned. Visit choose.va.gov.
Not all veterans are eligible for the type or amount of benefits mentioned here.
This podcast is brought to you by Carvana. Got a car to sell but no time to waste? Hop on to Carvana.com to get a real offer for your car in seconds. All you have to do is enter your license plate, answer a few quick questions, and if you accept the offer, Carvana will pay you as soon as you hand the keys over. They even offer same-day pickup in many cities. Save your time, score some cash, and sell your car the convenient way to
Carvana.
Pickup times vary. Fees may apply.
Hi, welcome to IKEA.
This is my college campus.
Correct, but I see you're on IKEA.com ordering some college items.
My daughter's room is pretty bare. We need a lamp, some comfy pillows, her favorite stuffy.
Dad!
With pickup options, we've got what you need to conveniently order IKEA. Literally anywhere.
Sweet. More time for gaming.
And studying. Wait, where are you going now?
Have to show the ultimate Frisbee team how easy it is to order from IKEA. Get IKEA whenever, wherever, however you want. Choose from thousands of pickup locations, affordable delivery options, and more.
Shopping is hard, right? But I found a better way. Stitch Fix online personal styling makes it easy. I just give my stylist my size, style, and budget preferences. I order boxes when I want and how I want. No subscription required. And he sends just for me pieces, plus outfit recommendations and styling tips. I keep what works and send back the rest. It's so easy. Make style easy. Get started today at stitchfix.com/Spotify. That's stitchfix.com/Spotify.
Have you ever spotted McDonald's hot, crispy fries right as they're being scooped into the carton? And time just stands still. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Welcome to the HCI family of podcasts. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We share our own original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. Join us for practitioner-oriented content around all things leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with the HCI family of podcasts. Glen Wood, welcome to the conversation today.
Thanks very much, John. It's a pleasure to be with you.
It is a real pleasure to be sitting down with you. It's afternoon for me here south of Salt Lake City in Utah. You're joining me from Tokyo, Japan, first thing in the morning for you. And today we're going to be talking about sustainability and really what it means to be sustainable in 2025. And I really am thrilled to have a chance to have this conversation with you. Super important topic, of course. And we're really going to try to unpack this and explore some of the nuances here and really what it means, generally speaking, for sustainability, but really what organizations can.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Be doing to be more sustainable this year and into the future. As we get started, I wanted to share Glen's bio with everybody. Glen Wood is president and co-founder of Smart Vision Logistics, a company committed to the implementation of sustainable supply chains. As an authority on the economy and parental rights in the workplace, Glen has been featured on CNN, CNBC, and the BBC, and in prominent publications like the New York Times, the Washington Post, and others. And I could go on. There's so many wonderful things about your background, but I'm going to pause there. Anything, Glenn, that you would like to highlight about your own background, personal context, professional trajectory before we dive on into the conversation?
Thanks very much, John. Again, it's a pleasure to be here. And that was a wonderful introduction. I'm humbled by that. But let me just say, my work and what I'm doing revolves around my own experiences, kind of what drove that. I'm happy to share what kind of drove me to this place starting 10 years ago. But more than anything, I just want to make this sustainability thing a little bit easier to understand, something more practical. I want to make businesses thrive in 2025, and I think this is what this book is about, and this is what my message is about today.
Wonderful, wonderful. And you just teased a little bit. I didn't mention anything specifically about your book yet, but you mentioned it briefly. Tell us a little bit about your book, and really what drove you and your co-founder to write this. Because, books are a labor of love. They take a lot of time and energy to get out there into the world.
Thanks, John. Yeah, so 10 years ago, I was faced with kind of an impossible situation. My son was born prematurely, and he was in the neonatal intensive care unit, in actually another country, a country different than I was in at the time. And I was getting calls from the hospital saying it's an emergency, you have to come right away. We're not sure if your son's going to make it or not. It's life or death. And I approached my company at the time with this situation and said, I needed to take a little bit of time off. I needed to be there for my family. And long story short, they fired me, and and that's where this story really begins. And the book is called Too Big to Care, and it focuses again on what do we need to do as managers, as politicians, as leaders in today's world. What do we need to do to be sustainable? What does sustainability really mean? And if we do that, what's going to happen? Our profit's going to go down, our profit's going to go up. Is this going to be something that's going to be really difficult to do? Or is this just kind of basic humanity? And obviously, I argue the latter.
Yeah, well, and I totally agree. I do think it's the latter. And I think it's a false dichotomy. I think so many people frame it as a dichotomy. It's either profitability, or you're all green and saving the planet, warm fuzzies, and there's no possible way that you can even keep your business and your doors open. And I think that's ridiculous. And I think there's so many examples of companies that have embraced sustainability that are incredibly profitable, that are incredibly sustainable, sustainable in terms of the economy, the environment, sustainable in all sorts of different framings, all sorts of different meanings. And so let's kind of dispel that myth, I think, right out of the gate, because it's just not true. And there are so many examples that we could provide of that. And while I'm sad that you had that experience, I appreciate the example that you shared about your own, family and your own experience of being let go for that. I've had similar experiences, not quite that extreme, but I've had similar experiences where you just have a heartless corporation who it's almost bewildering how just tone deaf and just blinded to like a basic human situation, sometimes a company might be, when, in reality, like human to human, anyone would look at that and they'd say, of course, take time for your kid, take time for your family. And for some reason, when people find themselves in this corporate environment, they just forget, or they find themselves loyal to the company, and those types of decisions end up happening. And it's completely unnecessary. And in fact, if you talk about parental leave as a phenomenon over the last, half decade, that's become widely embraced. When, I have 6 children, not a single one of those 6 children were born under the umbrella of parental leave for me. Thankfully, my wife had maternity leave. I didn't have the benefit of parental leave during, the time any of my children were born. And yet, nowadays it's just common. And so things do change, and thankfully, organizations do start to wise up to those sorts of things. But my goodness, it all, in that situation, it all just boils down to like treat people with dignity and respect, treat people as humans. Like, why in the world wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you just treat people the way you want to be treated? It seems fairly obvious, right?
Absolutely. And, I argue in the book that if any employee, if anybody working for you or any employee ever comes to you with a situation where it's a family emergency, there's only one response. Go. There's only
Deal with it, yeah.
there's only one response. And in fact, I argue that that response is actually going to lead to higher profitability, not lower profitability. So whether you're a greedy capitalist or a tree hugger, it doesn't really matter. This isn't, I really cut clear of politics in the book, and I refuse to take a stance on either the left or the right because I believe this is apolitical. It's an issue that crosses the aisle. It's very simple. And in fact, if you follow these basic principles that I highlight in the book, you're going to end up being more profitable in 2025. And if you don't follow these principles, you're going to have a problem with it as an ongoing concern for your business. So if you care about, I argue as well, the whole idea of sustainability is a really strange word, isn't it? Isn't it, John?
Yeah.
Sustainability literally means an ongoing concern. So who starts a business hoping that it doesn't continue, right?
Yeah.
And so frankly, sustainability is just a given, and it should have been a given from the beginning of time. And these policies, or the systematic firing of pregnant women in a corporation, that might have been a great idea 50 years ago. I don't think so, but if it did work 50 years ago, I'm telling you, it doesn't work in 2025. And to the extent that you follow through on some of these basic guidelines that I highlight in this book, you're going to be more profitable. You're going to be more sustainable. And the whole idea of capitalism, I think, has kind of perverted itself into this thing where it's only the bottom line. It's only the bottom line. Well, in fact, capitalism is an agreement, I argue, that it's twofold. The contract is twofold. One, you have an excellent product and service that continually generates outsized profits. That's fantastic. The other half of the agreement here, the other half of the contract of capitalism for a corporation or an economy is to add extraordinary value to society.
Yeah.
And these two are inextricably linked. You can't separate these two. In 2025, if you try to tear these two apart, you're going to tear your business apart.
Yeah. Completely agree. And, there's lots of different ways of framing it. We have, if we're talking about the environmental sustainability piece, you have triple bottom line, ESG, stakeholder capitalism. You have all these different frameworks for thinking about environmental sustainability. If you're just talking about other forms of like people-centric sustainability, you mentioned things like simple equal employment opportunity. We can talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging initiatives, those sorts of things. Like there's all sorts of different ways to look at it. The bottom line, though, is we're treating people like human beings. We're treating people with dignity and respect. We're not taking people or the environment or external stakeholders or whatever. We're not taking them for granted, right? We're treating everyone as though they're part of a valued whole. Society as a whole is part of what we're considering. It's not just us in our little business thinking, how can we make as much money as we possibly can as short of a time as we possibly can and exploit whatever we possibly can in order to make that happen, because we all know we're part of a larger system. And if we're going to continue to, and it's all interrelated, right? And if we're going to continue to add value and make money, and we have to continue to function within that relationship and that system, right? That's not rocket science. Like that makes sense, and I think everyone understands that you have to, like, that's built on trust. And if you exploit, whether that's exploiting labor or the environment or consumers or whatever, that trust breaks down and you can't do it anymore, right?
That's right. Exactly. So, I think there's three main principles that we've already talked about here, but just to highlight where we are. One, putting people first. You have to put people first, and you have to schedule time to listen to your people. It sounds so basic, but we schedule all these meetings, we schedule all these flights and business trips and family excursions. We schedule all these things, but in all my experiences as a corporate officer, I've rarely seen in anybody's schedule the time to just sit down and listen to people and listening to people and figuring out where people are at and meeting people where they're at and meeting people's needs is one of the core things. The
Can
second
I
is
add to that? Can I add to that real quick? Because I have seen on occasion where people will schedule, like a new executive will come in and they'll say, I'm going to schedule meetings. I'm going to do a listening tour. I'm going to schedule listening meetings. To your point, like they'll say they get it, and they'll say, I need to do this. I need to go listen. I've seen people do that. The question is, are they really listening? Are they really going around trying to understand what people are thinking and where they're coming from? Or is it performative? And are they only acting like they're listening? And are they only doing it because they think that's what they're expected to do? And in my experience, it's almost always only performative. So you're absolutely right. People need to listen. They need to pay attention. They need to schedule the time to do it, and they need to do it for real and not just act like they're doing it and not just do it because that's what they think people want them to do, but to really do it and to do it because it's actually going to help them understand where their people are coming from. It's absolutely essential.
Exactly. At the end of the day, John, how can you motivate people if you don't know what already motivates them? And that requires listening and understanding and empathy. The second one is just utilization and maximization, optimization of resources. And when I say resources, I mean all resources. So human capital is number one, really, in terms of resources, and it often gets shifted to number three. But that's number one, is are you maximizing your use of your human capital? And what does that mean? Two is just maximization of your physical resources. And then three is maximization of your financial resources. But I would argue again that the human capital efficiency of your organization will really tell the management and will tell me what sort of organization you have. And as an investor, increasingly, that's what investors are looking for. And that's kind of where this whole ESG thing comes from, is are you maximizing your human capital? And I often find the answer to that question is unfortunately no. And then third is just how you treat your customers. If your customers aren't fans of your product and services, if it's a one-time transactional type of deal with your customers, then you're not sustainable. And I think if you focus on those three things in 2025, and I go into much detail on each of those in the book, I think you'll be very not only sustainable but very profitable.
Right. And again, I'll highlight that that's not rocket science, right? Nothing you just said there is like going to break the internet. I mean, these are all like foundational principles, and yet we see companies and executives violating those basic foundational principles all the time, constantly. Why do you think that is? Because I mean, it really isn't rocket science, but it's hard. I guess it's hard to do because we see people violating it all the time.
Well, I think people have a tendency of being short-sighted, and there's also this. I talk a little bit about the politicization of sustainability and ESG in the book, and that really is a death spiral. Soon as you see politicians or governments latch on to some of these trigger words and try to make a political game out of it, then it really is a downward spiral. That's where you get the greenwashing, John, and that's where you get these beautiful CSR color brochures that tell about all the wonderful things the company's investing in these forests in Argentina. That's not what this is about, John. This starts with people. That's where sustainability starts. It starts one-on-one. And I think that's where some of the short-sightedness really comes from. And I think in the past, before we had Glassdoor, before we had some of these really transparency-driven tools that even the secretaries or all individuals in the corporation now have access to, right? Before we had those tools, maybe top management was able to get away with some of these things. At this point, I argue you're not. It's too transparent. That game is over. So what is the new game? How do you maximize profits if that's what you want to do? Well, there is a bottom line, and this is the bottom line.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. And so leaders, executives, boards, corporations as a whole, they need to be less short-sighted. They need to set their egos aside. They need to try to have a longer term orientation and perspective around these things. Like you said, the term sustainability itself is almost kind of silly because the whole point of an organization is to sustain itself. The whole purpose of an organization is to self-perpetuate. Like that's why they exist, right? That's why they came into existence. And so it literally every organization should be sustainable, and yet we self-sabotage for a wide variety of reasons. We self-sabotage as leaders, as organizations, and how we structure and the policies, practices, procedures we put in place. And I think about like you're in Tokyo. I think about the differences in cultures between like back in Asia and in Japan versus say here where I'm at here in the US. And we are so short-term oriented, for example, here in the US in comparison to where you're at. And you probably see this daily. And not it's an oversimplification, certainly, but generally speaking, there's a much longer term orientation in many Asian countries compared to in many Western countries like in the US. Um, we tend to be much more individualistic and ego driven here in the US in many Western countries than in many Asian countries like in Japan. I lived and worked in South Korea for many years. It's very similar in that way in Korea and many Korean businesses and how they function in Korean society as to comparable in many ways to there in Japan, and it's just fundamentally different, in how often they view things in that short term versus long term orientation, and this whole idea of sustainability. It just has a whole different, I think, meaning. It fits differently and resonates differently when you have that different kind of a perspective, right? And here, perhaps in the Western kind of mindset or a short-term mindset, we just got to be hammered home with it again and again and again because we tend to be just so individualistic. We tend to be so short-term oriented. We tend to be so ego-driven that we literally are shooting ourselves in the foot, and we're short-circuiting our own success, and we're sabotaging ourselves again and again and again in the chase for looking good on the quarterly earnings report, or getting that short-term bonus or anything to look good right now so that maybe we can jump to that next, hop to that next career opportunity, get that next promotion, or whatever the case may be. And people build entire careers doing that here, where they'll jump, from one job to one job to the next job to the next job, never staying anywhere long enough to actually show what they're doing or what they're accomplishing. As long as they move fast enough, they never actually have to be accountable for anything, right?
Yeah, accountability is core for management, I think, across the board. Maybe I can give one quick example that will highlight some of the things we're talking about. Abigail Johnson, the head of Fidelity, they had a problem a few years back with harassment. I think it was sexual harassment, but in any case, let's just call it harassment. And I highlight in the book how she dealt with that because I really commend her, and I think it really shows a great example of sustainable leadership practices. So sustainable leadership is, it begins with the truth and understanding kind of really what's going on. And then it comes down to not hiding the truth, but being forthright and dealing with the problem directly. So she made the bold move of actually firing the person who was doing the harassing. And then she moved her office to the floor of where this problem had actually happened, so she could see it directly and deal with it one-on-one. And as a result, the problem was resolved. And it's a great example of top leadership taking things into their own hands. No smoke and mirrors, no hiding the truth, no fuzzy, no trying to protect the perpetrator, but actually dealing with the situation, firing the person who did the offense, and then being on the floor and managing people, even as top management, to make sure this never happens again. And I think it's that type of leadership. It's kind of the antithesis of what you mentioned a minute ago of the short-term job hopping. Someone who is firmly grounded as an owner in the business, has stake in the game, is accountable to shareholders, and follows through with the truth and moves the situation forward. That's true sustainable leadership and true sustainable management. And we need more of that today, John.
Yeah, yeah. So what would you say? I think most people listening are well-intentioned. Most people listening are thinking, yeah, yeah, they're nodding and they're saying, yeah, these are things we need to do. We need to have longer term perspective. We need to be more sustainable. Most people are agreeing and they're saying, yeah, we need to do these things. And yet you get into the daily grind. You get the pressures put upon you. Your boss is telling you, to focus on these things, and then you feel the pressure, and then you pass the pressure along to the people on your team, and you fall back into the same patterns, and you fall back into the same, messiness day in and day out. How do you start to interrupt that when you find yourself in that daily grind? How do you start to, put yourself on the path that's a little bit more healthy and a little bit more positive and sustainable when you find yourself in the mix of what I might call a toxic environment, or at least a less healthy, less sustainable environment?
Yeah, great question. So what motivates people? What is going to drive efficiency and better performance in the organization? Let's ask ourselves these questions and shut down the daily grind for a minute and just say, okay, how efficient are we really operating? How, are our people satisfied? If people aren't excited about coming to work, John, the chances of them being efficient, motivated employees are pretty low.
Yeah.
So how do we motivate them and get them excited about coming to their job? And then, first of all, you have to ask yourself that same question, right? Are you excited and motivated about going to your job? You wake up early because you're thrilled to get into the office. Well, I do. And I think that's kind of the key of where all this begins. If you're if you're not excited and driven and passionate about what you're doing, and you cannot pass that and motivate that, you cannot pass that on to your employees, then you're not likely going to be sustainable. And so, it comes back to people management. It comes back to what's already motivating your people. It comes back to resource utilization. Are you maximizing the use of your human capital? Are you micromanaging? If you're micromanaging, then something's wrong. Your people aren't motivated to do what they're supposed to be doing, because micromanagement is kind of the antithesis of motivated, happy employees. and so getting back to the whole sustainability thing, it's kind of an oxymoron, as we discussed. But frankly, if you're not sustainable, you're not only not going to be maximizing your profits, you're going to be actually destroying your business. And I think that's the fact. And yes, it's easy to get in the daily grind. You schedule things. Sometimes you just need to set the daily grind aside and go back to some of the basic core questions. And at the end of every chapter of the book, I call them guided reflections, but I put those questions in there to kind of give managers and politicians and whoever reads this book. I think it's applicable both in the private and public sectors, frankly. Take a look at those guided reflections. Even if you skip through the chapters quickly, go through and take seriously those guided reflections and answer those questions honestly. And I think you'll see a revolution in your business. I think you'll see a real transformation in how you operate and the growth and the sustainability, and at the end of the day, the profitability of your business.
I love it. I love it. Well, this has just been such a great conversation. I note the time. I need to let you get on with your busy day. You're just starting your busy day. Before we wrap things up, I wanted to give you a chance to provide the listeners with a little bit of background of how they can get connected with you, find out more about your work, your team, where they can find your book, and then give us the final word on the topic for today.
Thanks very much, John. So please connect with me on LinkedIn. That's an easy platform. I update that regularly. There's lots of details there. Our company's website is smartvisionlogistics.com. There's also details there. I have a web page around parental rights, because I think parental rights is kind of the core of sustainability. If people don't have the opportunity to have a family and a career, well, you're not sustainable. So it's glenwoodparentalrights.com. We have a petition on change.org that is highlighted also on the webpage. Please take a look at that. We've got over 30,000 signatures there, and it's growing rapidly. So, we love to connect with people. If you believe in what we're doing, if you believe in this concept of kind of basic sustainability, not this pie in the sky stuff, but actually, rubber hits the road sustainability and how that connects to profitability, please take a look. Our book is Too Big to Care. You can find it on Amazon. We'd love to have some reviews, but yeah, please connect with us there. Thank you very much for your time today, John. This has been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Glenn. It's been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Glenn can do for you. Check out the book. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the podcast. We hope you stay healthy and safe, and please join us again soon.